All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Monday, the second day of June, and yet another year is just moving right along. We're almost halfway through 2025. Not a great year, certainly not if you're living in Gaza, if you're living on the West Bank. Things are very, very, very rough. And in much of the world, if you're working class, if you're poor, anywhere is bad, but there are more of us who are struggling than ever before, and certainly in this country, times are not good for many, many millions of Americans. That's what this program is about, really trying to provide a voice for those who are not at the top, who are not elite, who are not doing exceedingly well, either by relative standards to other Americans or simply relative to history. And there's certainly been some progress made, but we've taken many steps back as well. Violence continues to be a terrible, terrible problem around the world, and the bloodshed that Israel is wreaking in do you wreak bloodshed? The blood that Israel is shedding in Gaza is impacting all around the world. There is a group that's called Run for Their Lives. They have activities, they have rallies. They had one they had one around the world. I think the main one was in Israel, but yesterday in Boulder, folks rallied, and it's for the hostages. It's for the hostages being held by Hamas, not the hostages held by Israel, not the victims of Israeli terror, but for the hostages being held by Hamas. There are about 20. And I had some sympathy. Usually I'm not very sympathetic for people or for groups or organizations that center Israeli victims, center victims of the Palestinians, because there's so many fewer and the oppressor is Israel. But I had some empathy, some sympathy for these folks because it seemed to me they also at least included a pro-peace element. And they were attacked. They were subject to terror in Boulder, Colorado. We're going to talk about that, what the right response is to that attack on the ralliers for the hostages. We're going to the hostages held by Hamas. That is, we're going to talk about what the right response is by the left, by progressives, by the pro-peace movement, by the pro-life movement. What is the right response? We'll get to that, but we will first start with what's happening right now in Gaza. And that is the context. You cannot lose the context when we talk about what's happening, what happened in Boulder, and how there was a terror attack on ralliers for the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. We can't lose sight of the context. The context is a genocide being committed by Israel. Death toll now reaching near 54,500. That's about 2.5% of the population in Gaza, the entire population in Gaza. So if we had a corollary number of deaths in this country, that would be 8-10 million. 2.5% of 350 plus million. I don't know. I'd have to do the math. 2.5 times 3.5, 7, about 8, close to 9 million people, 8.5, 9 million people. It's not just dead either. You have well over 100,000 Palestinians injured. So that's over 5% of the population. Israel's maimed. They've shot the eyes out. They've ripped limbs off of people. Well over 100,000 since October 7th. It's horrific. It's a monstrous crime, and it's happening right now with our support, with the support of the American government. And you don't get to make excuses. Well, I voted Democratic. Well, the war by Israel on the Palestinian people began in earnest. This most recent iteration of it began in earnest under Democratic administration, the Harris-Biden administration, and they did pretty much everything they could to facilitate the killing. And of course, it's continued under the Republicans. Horrific. Just a real quick story here. This is the report today's Anadolu Ajansi, the Turkish news agency, reporting 52 bodies recovered since yesterday. 52 bodies recovered in the last 24 hours, with the injury toll, as we told you, over 124,000 now. And there's no, pass for Trump since March 18, when Israel renewed its onslaught against individuals, against the civilian population. Trump and Netanyahu have killed more than 4,201 Gazans and probably over 1,500 children. It's just absolutely sickening. You can only hope, we're not going to see justice in this world, in this planet. The people who are guilty are not going to be brought to trial. Maybe, possibly some Israelis, maybe, I doubt it, will pay some price for their genocide, but can only hope. And I think, this is probably part of the reason we have religion, is because humans have seen throughout our history on this earth, maybe 100,000, who knows how many long there have been, there were Homo sapiens, not maybe just a few 100,000 years of Homo sapiens, but, humanoids for millions of years. We've seen people do terrible, terrible things, awful crimes, and be rewarded for it. Die wealthy, powerful, rewarded after doing the most horrible things to people. So you imagine that can't be the end of the story. You don't get to just live to be 80 years old after you've slaughtered thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions, in case of a Genghis Khan, millions of people. You've just slaughtered them wantonly. You're a colonizer like a Columbus, an enslaver. You just get to enjoy your ill-gotten gains. You're a mafioso, gangster. You get to bask in the adulation of your followers, and that's it. Victims say, well, no, there must be some place, somewhere after you die where you face some kind of divine punishment. At least that's probably the hope that gave rise in part to religion. I think we're religious in general. That people religion because that's how you tell friend from foe. That's how you justify your bad actions against others, because God told you it's okay, or your gods tell you get to go kill the people on the other side of the river, or you better be prepared to protect yourself against those people on the other side of the river. And of course, there are major evolutionary benefits to both, right? There's benefits to being the first to kill the tribe on the other side of the river. You get their land, you get their resources, you get to, if you're a man, you get to impregnate their children. If you're a woman, your children, you get to impregnate their women and have more children. If you're a woman, then your sons will get to impregnate more women, and therefore your genes will be passed on. And if you are merely suspicious, if you're constantly on your guard against the people on the other side because their God is violent and aggressive and he'll go after you, well, you may protect yourself against a potential invasion. So that's why I really think religion serves the main function, which is to tell us who is our friends, who are our allies, and to justify bad acts against others. That's true, but it's also, I'm sure, true that there's this desire, this blind desire for justice, even if we all know that on this planet, many of the worst people get great rewards. All right, if you want to join me, 240-242-5646, would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. In the wake of this terrible crime against humanity committed by Israel, there were hostages, the crime by Israel is being justified as a response to the hostage taking and the the attack by Hamas on October 7th. And in response to that, we have seen worldwide rallies by this group called Run for Their Lives, where the lives of the hostages are being centered. And in general, I'm not particularly sympathetic to such a group, because while I certainly have sympathy for the hostages and their families, the ultimate victims of the Israeli genocide, by far the most numerous victims, certainly, are the people of Palestine, or Palestinians, or innocent civilians, women, children, men. And there are some hostages, and I feel very, very bad for the hostages. I want them to be released. I want them to be saved. They could be saved. Some have been saved when there's been ceasefires, when Israel has stopped killing Gazans, then hostages have been released. Here's an image from the CNN website where they show folks at the Run for Their Lives rally. At least I trust CNN to this extent anyway. This is an image from a Run for Their Lives rally in Tel Aviv. And you can see that woman holding a sign, "Save the hostages, end the war." Well, to me, that's the exact correct message. If your real concern, if your first concern, your primary concern is the hostages, and they're very important, then the best way to save them, the only way, is to end the killing, is for Israel to stop slaughtering and massacring and destroying Gaza. And we know that because we've had hostage releases since the attack by Israel began on October 7. We've had hostage releases when there have been ceasefires. In the month or two after the war by Israel on the Gazan people began, in December, there were hostage releases. And when Trump first took office, there were hostage releases. So that woman holding the sign, "Save the hostages, end the war," is exactly right. And I circled it, or I ovaled it, because that is a message I utterly back, I support. And seeing folks at this rally run for their lives, at least one of them saying "end the war." I don't know what the sign's in. I think one of those is in Arabic, and I don't know whether those say "end the war" also. Maybe they do, or whatever language that might be. But, I have some sympathy for that, obviously. And seeing that, I thought, well, why are you attacking the people at Run for Their Lives in Boulder when they seem, at least some of them seem to be promoting a pro-peace message? Why are you attacking them? That's my question to the pro-Palestine activists. Could it be, as CNN claims, that there was some sort of animus against Jews generally, not specifically against those promoting the genocide? Because at least from that sign, it would seem to me maybe these rally goers in Boulder are against the Israeli genocide. And if that were the case, and if the attack were launched not because of some support for Palestine, but rather a misguided notion, or not even misguided, but rather these are Jewish people. And even though I kind of agree with at least some of their message, I don't care, they're Jews, I'll kill them. Now that doesn't, there's no proof of that. We don't know that. We have zero reason to think that the terrorist in Boulder was motivated by anti-Semitic animus, except that the victims were, and none of them were killed. I believe they're all survived, but 6-7 people injured, burned. Serious, very serious. It's a bad thing. We can speculate, not totally unreasonably, if that rally were a pro-peace rally, if the message were for peace. Now, even then, I don't think we should jump to the assumption that, or jump to the conclusion that it was motivated by anti-Semitism. We're going to play a clip here, and then we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into this group. But the headline writer at CNN says, yes, it's anti-Semitic. And in the end, I have to ask, why would you say that? What is the basis for that conclusion? Is that conclusion because you claim this group is pro-peace? And if they're pro-peace, there'd be no reason to attack, except if you hate Jews. Let's play the clip. This is short from The Independent.
This attack happened at a regularly scheduled weekly peaceful event. Witnesses are reporting that the subject used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into the crowd. The suspect was heard to yell, "Free Palestine," during the attack.
All right, so he said, "Free Palestine." And I made this point when we were talking about the killing outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. of the two Israeli embassy staffers. The killer there, this case is not a killer, but the terrorist here in Boulder, like the Washington, D.C. shooter, they yelled, "Free Palestine." They didn't yell, "Kill the Jews." They didn't yell, "Hitler was right." They didn't say, "It's time for another Holocaust." If they had said any of those things, it would seem to me wholly appropriate to conclude it was motivated, the crime was motivated by anti-Semitism. But if you listen to the criminal himself, and in both cases they're men, himself, you look at the criminal themselves, their message is absolutely clear. Free Palestine. Stop the war on Palestine. Now, maybe, just maybe, they're misguided because this isn't going to work. But maybe, just maybe, at least with respect, and there was a lot of talk that the victims in D.C. were really pro-peace, that they were trying to broker some kind of rapprochement between Israelis and Palestinians. I've seen other stories that claim opposite, claim different. I don't really know the answer to that. What I can say is this. If you commit, as Israel is, a genocide, you cannot be surprised that there's going to be retaliation, there's going to be a response, and that innocent people will suffer, will pay a price. The question then we have to ask, well, were these people innocent? I mean, the staffers, and it doesn't make it okay if they're partly guilty, right? It doesn't mean you got to kill someone because they did something or they're doing something you don't like. The only time, in my opinion, violence is justified is to protect someone or to protect yourself, to protect another. That's the basis of the self-defense claim. Yes, you can strike another person. Yes, you can even kill another person if they're prepared or about to kill you, or they're about to kill someone else or hurt seriously someone else. That wasn't the case in Israel. With the Israeli embassy staffers. They weren't killing anybody in that moment. Likewise, or about to. Likewise, and I mean, obviously, if you're talking about like some sort of a general or someone like a monster, like a Nazi, a Heydrich or someone like that who has killed before and will kill again, yeah, then then there's the hard cases like that. But that wasn't the case with the Israeli embassy staffers. They weren't torturers. They weren't soldiers who were about, to go out, back out into the field and start killing people. Different situation altogether. Likewise, the Boulder rally goers were not Israeli military. They weren't generals. They weren't Netanyahu. They weren't Trump. They weren't somebody who was in a position where they could kill a lot of people quickly. So there's no self-defense. There's no defense of others' claims whatsoever that you could possibly maybe try to justify some crime against them, some action against them. You can't do that. But what you can do is ask, well, were they really innocent? And with respect to the Israeli embassy staffers, they chose to work for Israel. I think that means you're not really innocent, right? You're choosing to work for a genocidal state. If you choose to work for Nazi Germany, are you innocent? I don't think you are. And I'm going to make the same point with regard to the rally goers. At first, when I saw that sign where they're saying end the war, or there's someone at a rally saying, "End the war." Yes, that's the right message. That's a good. They're innocent, but not run for their lives. It's really not a group of innocent people. If you look at sort of the materials online, global run walk events calling for the immediate release of the hostages held by Hamas. That's the purpose of this. Release the hostages held by Hamas. It's not to end the killing. It's not to end the war. It's not to end not to release the hostages held by Israel, as well as by Hamas. Just the only people that are being centered, the only victims whose lives matter in the Run for Their Lives rally are the hostages. And some would say, well, but what about, there's plenty of, Hal, you go out in the streets, you're at rallies for the victims in Palestine, you're not really talking about the hostages. And I would say, well, I do center the Palestinians, but so many more of them have been killed, and they're being killed every single day. And peace, ceasefire would lead to the release of the hostages. But yeah, I'll cop to it. Right now, my primary concern is the people of Palestine, not the hostages. I'll cop to that. I mean, it's probably morally not a justifiable position. Every life should matter the same. I don't see how you can have a rally for the hostages held by Hamas and show zero empathy, not talk about exactly what Israel is doing. And yet, if you look at their website, and they don't say one word, I went through the whole thing. At least I couldn't find it. If it's there, maybe it is and I missed it. I didn't see one word about a ceasefire. Not one word. Making this a global movement, that's the global movement, Rally for Their Lives, shows that we all care, regardless of nationality or religion. You don't need to be Jewish to be disturbed by this crisis. But what crisis? The hostage held by Hamas, not by what Israel's doing. They feel for the hostages, not they feel for the children that Israel's shooting in the head, or the refugees being bombed. No, they feel for the hostages. Innocent children, women, the elderly, and young people should not be living in tunnels 20 meters underground for over a year. Well, I agree with you. But what about all those innocent women, children, men who are living in camps, who are being bombed, who are being funneled into tiny little chutes by Israel, herded into tiny little chutes for just a bowl full of food? What about them? Do they matter at all? They're not referenced. They're not identified. And if you say, well, we can feel for more than one person, we can talk about one victim without having to talk about another, I would say that's true. I agree with you. But you can't separate them. The hostages are being held right now in Israel. The Israelis who are being held hostage are being held because of what Israel's doing to the Gazan people. If Israel stopped doing it, the hostages would be released. So it's very, very, it's disingenuous to talk about what the plight of the hostages is without discussing in detail exactly what Israel's doing to maintain them in captivity by Hamas, and also, by the way, to kill them, because many are being killed because of the bombing. They're hungry because of the bombing and because of the siege, because Israel is preventing aid getting in. So again, I can't view this rally or those rally goers as innocent. Doesn't mean they should be firebombed, doesn't mean it's okay, but it means, what it really means is that there's an explanation for what happened that isn't anti-Semitism. It's righteous anger at Israel and at the United States for the crimes against humanity that both are committing. That's the reason for it. That's the explanation. It's not anti-Semitism, and the media, as usual, is lying to you. The corporate media, the media that justifies the killing. All right, this is Halitics. Don't forget, please click like, click subscribe. Would love to have more and more. Of course, we want more subscribers. You know, I see some of these YouTubers have this like YouTube shield or something that they give out if you have a really big channel. And I thought if you got 1,000 subscribers, you get like a little pin or something, but no. Apparently you have to get to 100,000 to get the YouTube badge or certificate of honor, whatever it is, the silver, which is 100,000. So we got a hell of a long way to go, but who knows? Maybe we'll get there at some point. Please do click like, please do click subscribe, please share. I think we do a real good program here. I don't think anyone does what we do here. I think it's pretty unique. So hope that you'll let folks, friends know. By the way, see Ari in there. Ari, thank you for all your kind icons. And are those avatars or memes, I guess? The hands praying or thank you, the hands of thanks, the Palestinian flag, the hearts. I love them all. Thank you so much. This question, I saw on Facebook and I tried to respond to it, but I'm going to go to a New York Times story, which I think kind of explains why the New York Times and the Democratic Party are so unpopular. And there's going to be one of the people who is in this video is not a Democrat. He's a Republican and he's insufferable. But I think that the Democratic Party, but he's not a Trump supporter. He didn't vote for Trump. He didn't support Trump. As far as I know, he was against Trump. So it's not as though this insufferable ass in the video, David French, was a Trump supporter. It's the New York Times writers, columnists, who all of whom oppose Trump, who are really just, I think, people that you would, that there's good reason. It's easy to understand why many wouldn't like them. And we'll play the video for you. And I think it does really redound to the against the Democratic Party as well. So the article, June 2, today, why politics feel so cruel now. 3 opinion writers on the death of empathy, right, of concern for others in America. So what's going on here? There's a lot of video here, so I want to play the video, or not going to play all of it, but I'll play a few kind of choice bits that sort of jumped out at me, including the introduction. And this is Michelle Cottle, who, to be honest with you, I'm not really familiar with Michelle Cottle. I don't really spend a lot of time, paying attention to what she writes or has to say. She's never jumped out at me as a particularly interesting writer, but maybe she is, and I'm not being fair. And she has an interesting intro in any event. So let's play at least part of it. Here we go. The opinions, folks, the opinions. By the way, again, don't forget to click subscribe. I already played that. Also, just want to remind you to like what I'm doing here. I'm just not seeing my little like. There we go. Let's give you my like button as well. There's the thumbs up. Please like Halitics and like this particular video. Okay, let's get to the video itself.
So I want us to talk about something of a vibe shift that's happening right now in politics. And I feel like we're seeing a prime example in what might darkly be characterized as the death of empathy. So now, so
I want to just stop it for a second so you can see all 3 of them. And, they all have pretty nice backgrounds, right? Looks like they're all doing pretty well. You can't really tell from Cottle. I'm going to go back and play it again, but we'll go through it. I'd say they're affluent, right? These people, they're upper middle class. They're doing pretty well. Their life has treated them better than it's treated a lot of Americans. Is that not the case? Let's go back.
So I want us.
So there's Michelle Cottle. You can see, it's hard to tell with her room. She's got that closet there, stain in the background. There's some kind of a I don't know if that's like a Japanese screen effect, but, it sort of gives off their soft lighting. She's exuding a certain kind of privilege. She's the opinion politics correspondent. She's in the New York Times. You can't really tell so well from that background, but let's look at her colleagues and how well they're doing.
To talk about something of a vibe shift that's happening.
So there's Jamelle Bouie's house. You've got all those books, that bookshelf. You got the window with the green grass in the background. And again, they're not necessarily so affluent, but there's a certain level of comfort, I think, that you're getting from that image as well, with all the books, and there's some gewgaws. There's a camera up on top of the bookshelf. And again, a nice background behind him of his yard. So he's doing okay for sure, or better than okay.
Now in politics. And I feel like we're seeing a prime example in what might darkly be characterized as the death of...
So these are affluent people. Now there's David French. Look at that really nicely decorated all white room. He's got some kind of a built-in with some pretty fancy looking stuff, including some vases. And again, we don't know. These people may just be in one bedrooms, or at least he might be. It looked pretty clear that Bouie himself was in a house, but it still looks like they're doing pretty darn well. And we can fill in the blanks. They're published. They've written books, bestsellers. These are privileged people. And now they're going to talk about how there's death of empathy. People aren't really caring for other people. So let's see if we find out how much empathy these people show.
So now, for years, progressives have been engaged in a competition of sorts, which is like in the hierarchy of like intersectionality, who has the most right to be upset.
So she's saying that, and I think this is absolutely true, that a lot of progressives, remember we were talking about this last week too, progressives need to look, navel gaze. What have we done wrong? We have to have our own reckoning. And what Michelle Cottle's saying, well, we've had our, little contest to see in the hierarchy of who's the most victimized, who is the most justified in having grievance. And apparently, progressives don't feel, according to Michelle Cottle, that conservative white men are legitimately victims. They don't have the right to be aggrieved, according to her.
Who has the most right to be upset, which has put conservative white men in particular on the defensive at a time when they're already freaked out about shifting social and economic hierarchies.
So the problem is hierarchies, according to her. It's shifting social and economic hierarchies. Like they may not be at the top of the tree. It's not that they have less. It's not that their prospects are worse. It's just that, well, we're making things a little fairer, and now these folks feel bad about it.
People, I think, are tired of feeling guilty, and they have been very open to the idea that empathy or compassion is a weakness. Am I completely off base here? Are you guys seeing this? And if so, like, when and where did you notice it happening?
All right. So again, it's an interesting way that she frames it. I find it so incredibly irritating and annoying when privileged people, elites, point their finger at others and tell them they're doing something wrong. They don't have empathy. They feel, or simply put them under a what is it? Yeah. When you make something, a magnifying glass, or, in a, some sort of terrarium, and you examine them like they're some sort of exotic creature. And that's exactly what she's doing, right? Oh, these white working class conservative men, which I'm certainly not a white man, right? They're feeling put upon. They don't like shifting social hierarchies. It's so condescending. Immediately you're going to be turned off, especially if you're a white man. And she makes it about white conservative men, but the question then is, again, the hierarchies of victims. Where are white men in general considered? If we're going to have to do a hierarchy of victim based on identity, I think we'd all agree that white men are considered the least victimized, the least deserving of all the different groups, right? Of all intersectionality. This is why people hate these journalistic elites. For her, look, she's so, she's clearly incredibly privileged. She's doing these videos for the New York Times. You're getting paid a lot of money for them. You look at the way these people are living, and they're looking down on folks who are barely able to survive, or just hoping to make it to the next week. Of course there's going to be resentment of them, anger. Of course people are going to distrust them.
It's like an actual social problem.
Okay, let me stop that. All right, so that was not the video I wanted. Is it this one? Do I have two of the same? Because there's a video. I guess I've screwed this up somehow. No, they're different. Here we go. Let's try this.
Oh, you're full of shit. I don't think that. I don't think
Right.
that. No, it's just that I find myself of two minds, especially as the conversation relates to maybe conservative white men, or just maybe men in general, right? That it is absolutely true that sort of like we're in this time, this era of changing social norms, gender norms, changing ideas of what.
So again, look, what are the focus? Oh, gender norms, social change, not massive economic shifts where the working class gets less and less, a smaller and smaller piece of the pie, and the wealth and income is gushing upwards. No, that's not the issue. It's these social changes, cultural shifts. Well, I guess you don't talk about economic problems when you're doing really well, like Jamel Bowie is, or when your job is dependent on you stoking social and cultural dissension, pitting poor, struggling, working people against each other. If that's what your job requires you to do, then that's exactly what you're going to do. And that's exactly what Jamel Bowie is doing here. He's talking about, I don't know what these white people are so upset, these white conservative men. What are they even upset about? What? Because there's some changing social and cultural norms? It's not about, couldn't be because they can't afford health care for their family. Couldn't be because they can barely pay the rent. It couldn't be because they look at their kids and they think their lives are going to be even worse than mine. I can't even afford to send them to college.
To be a man, and there's not necessarily a script to follow. And it may feel, in fact, that if you are committed or, attached to very traditional notions of what manhood is.
Listen to this sort of gobbledygook, this sociological crap. Well, if you have this very traditional notion of what manhood is, well, maybe your notion is, if I work really hard, if I work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, I shouldn't be living in this crap hole with, 4 people, 3 other people, my wife and 2 kids, because we're talking about men here, and we're all jammed together. We don't have a lot of space. We don't have a lot of room. We have no hope for a better place. Maybe I'm not thinking that we should be living in my parents' basement. I don't know if that's a traditional view of manhood, but again, there's zero acknowledgement of the economic challenges that beset more and more Americans. So again, this is why people hate the New York Times. This is why people don't vote for the people that the New York Times tells them to vote for.
It may feel that there might not be very much space for you in this society. But
well, there isn't very much space. I mean, the bottom line is these folks are just, forgotten. And it's not just men, and it's not just white men. It's poor, struggling, and working people have less and less. Their lives are not getting better. They're more desperate. There's zero acknowledgement. And where's your empathy? I don't hear any empathy from Jamel Bowie there.
If conservative men feel that not enough empathy is being extended to them, like the question I have is sort of like, what specifically is the kind of disadvantage or crisis that you're facing on the basis of being a conservative white man?
So he's saying that the problem, if you're facing a problem, it's not, is it because you're a conservative white man? Is it really relevant? If people's lives are tough, if they're challenging, they don't have enough, if they see their hard work isn't repaid by a fair day's pay, when they see their boss taking the credit for what they're doing, does it matter what their politics are? And indeed, if their politics aren't yours, isn't maybe the question whether your politics is responsive to their needs? Isn't that something you might want to ask Jamel? But I don't think he's going to ask that question about himself. There's no reckoning. What demands your special attention? Let me play a little
special
more.
Attention, This is not to say that I don't think people have legitimate feelings, even maybe legitimate feelings.
So their feelings are legit, but they might even have legitimate grievances, right? They might even have legitimate grievances. But he doesn't say what they are. Let me finish this off because it's really instructive how Michelle Cottle responds. But basically, he doesn't really know what these people are upset about. He doesn't get it, what white conservative men might possibly have to aggrieve them.
This is not to say that I don't think people have legitimate feelings, even maybe legitimate feelings of grief.
All right, but then he's going to say that, he's going to go on to talk about how the real grievances are like black women who suffer higher mortality rates when they are giving birth. And that's a real problem. No one's denying it. That's a real issue. But is that the only issue? Here we go.
It's like an actual social problem.
Right. He's sort of chuckling. Oh, yeah, it's an actual social problem that black women suffer higher mortality rates. Yes, because they're poor, because poor people. And it's also, there's correlation with race, right? So if you say, well, if you take income out of the equation, so you just compare apples to apples, so you have working class black women and working class white women. It's true. Working class black women do suffer higher mortality rates during childbirth, and that's really bad. That's a real problem. We need to address it. We need to address high mortality rates in this country during birth, and I believe we are. But he's saying, well, that's a real problem. But what white men are complaining about, what white conservative men are complaining about, well, there's no real problem there. And how does Michelle Cottle respond?
It's like an actual social
like problem. He's laughing like, oh, the black women really are suffering, but not the white men. They don't have any complaints.
Problem.
But that speaks to David's point that it's not rational.
So that's her answer. Oh, they're not rational. Those white men, they're not rational. That's what David French was saying. The people who are upset, who are aggrieved, the Trump voters, the MAGA, they're not rational. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's about the most unempathic statement you could possibly make. You're looking at people who are upset, who are angry, and you're saying, well, their anger's irrational. That's not empathic. That's not trying to understand. That's saying you're crazy for feeling angry. So are they right? Is there no reason for Trump voters to be angry? It's just they're shifting cultural norms and sociological changes? Is that it? Well, I don't know. I think a declining life expectancy, that seems to me a pretty legitimate reason to be upset. I was talking about this earlier today, how working class people aren't living as long as they used to live. which is kind of amazing. And I did some research. This is the last study I could find that actually teases out the data by race and by demographics. So this is back in 2019. Study reveals declining life expectancy among white Americans that defies easy answers. So is that a legitimate reason to be angry, to be upset, to have grievances, to feel like maybe no one gives a fat rat's butt about you? Is that your life expectancy is shorter? Your children may not make it to be as old as you are. They're going to live a shorter life. Is that, do you get to be grieved about that, or is that just irrational? Jamel Bowie, David French, Michelle Cottle. Is that just something to snicker about? The biggest contrast we saw was between large metro areas. Guess where Cottle, Bowie, and French live? The New York City area. The biggest contrast we saw was between large metro areas and their suburbs and non-metro areas, which have moved in different directions. Between 1990 and 2016, so again, I think we have to wait till the next census and then we'll find out more. Non-metro areas had rising mortality, which is extremely, so for, what is that, 26-year period, we see people living in rural areas in non-metropolitan areas having shorter lives. They're more likely to die. Do you get to be angry about that? Or is that just, irrational? And they explain it more here. By the way, this would also explain why Bernie Sanders was doing so well and would have won in 2016 over Trump. The story of declining life, but you know what? Those Democratic primary voters, I guess, didn't have empathy because they voted for somebody whose policies were directly responsible for the declining life expectancy. The pro-free trade deals, the great incarceration under Bill Clinton as a result of the crime bill that Hillary Clinton supported, the economic crisis caused by the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. The story of declining life expectancy is a tale of those who die young and of a divide between urban and rural. Rising mortality is especially stark among 25 to 44-year-olds, largely. So I think that largely is really important due to the opioid crisis. So it's not only due to the opioid crisis. It's largely due. Even without the opioid crisis, among that period, 25 to 44-year-olds, young to middle-aged adults, are dying at greater risk. And why is there an opioid crisis among that group? Well, they're depressed. They're looking for any answer to an increasingly constricted life. I just find it extraordinary to me. This is, by the way, the white demo from the article. It's just extraordinary to me that this crisis isn't even acknowledged in the discussion of lack of empathy. I mean, it proves how they have no empathy, those New York Times writers. It really proves it. But okay, maybe you say, well, all right, people are dying because they're depressed because of social and cultural changes, but it's not economics. They're doing fine economically. It's just that they're not at the top of the tree like they used to be. They're not doing better than other groups. That's the argument Cottle gives. Well, they used to be large and in charge. Well, first of all, let's look at the economics. Is it true that working class people, white people, are actually doing just as well? They don't have any real reason to be upset. Maybe they're committing suicide, but it's not because, or maybe they're just dying of depression, but it's not because they're actually worse off. They just don't feel better than other people. Well, according to Fidelity, only 2 in 5, 41% of Americans can afford a $1,000 major unexpected expense. So most Americans can't, and that includes a lot of white Americans. That's down. So fewer and fewer Americans now can afford even a $1,000 emergency. Gee, you think that might increase their stress? You think they got a call about a car crash in the middle of the night? Their 16-year-old is in a collision. You don't think that's going to increase their stress, knowing they don't even have $1,000 to pay for the emergency room visit, which could be $5,000, $8,000, $10,000. Wow. I mean, but no, we don't have empathy. That's the problem. Because these white working voters, they don't have empathy for others, and they expect us to have to have some sort of concern for their grievances. It's extraordinary. This is why Democrats lose. This is why people hate the New York Times. This is why people hate liberal media. The condescension is so extraordinary. I want to just talk about one other, because I thought Cottle's framing was so interesting, that progressives have spent the last few years promoting a hierarchy of grievances where some people, some groups are more, allowed to be upset, that their anger, their resentment. I mean, I have a lot of anger with Michelle Cottle. I don't agree with her framing. Of course, I think those upset working people have every right to be upset. It's not just they have a right. The basis of their anger is real. It's not irrational. It's legit. It's because the economy has been reconfigured and reset to hurt them and to benefit the billionaire class. And they're mad, and understandably so. Their lives are worse. Their children's lives are likely to get even worse than their own. Of course they're bitter. And then if they watch that podcast, which I'm certain they don't, they'd be even more pissed off being told that their anger is irrational. By all of them, right? By Cottle, who says, well, that's what David French said, they're irrational. By French, he says they're irrational. And by Bowie, who says, I don't know what they're upset about. But she does get it right when she talks about the hierarchy, right? Some victims are more victims than other victims. And you see this everywhere. But I just want to highlight this one thing. So I was talking about, probably some people think I'm fixated on trans people or trans athletes, but this story got my attention in California. So this trans girl, A.B. Hernandez, won some events in girls' competition in California, Interscholastic Federation events. I think jumping, some sort of high jump or broad jump or both, or high jump and triple jump. And the great majority of Americans actually don't believe that the athlete, A.B. Hernandez, should be competing against girls. They think that the athlete should be competing against boys since biologically she's male. That's what most Americans believe. Not all, but most. But you get from progressives a tremendous amount of sympathy for A.B. Hernandez. Now, I think A.B. Hernandez, I'm sure, is victimized in many ways. Being trans can't be easy. I don't want to get into all the sociological stuff about this. I watched an interesting video about why we may be seeing more people identifying as trans. I thought it was very, very interesting, but I don't want to get into that. I don't care about that for the purpose of this discussion. For the purposes of this discussion, what I'm going to say is progressives understandably have great empathy for A.B. Hernandez. But what I have, so she is viewed as a righteous victim, as a legitimate victim, unlike those irrational white conservative men who have nothing to be upset about, according to the New York Times panel, all three members of it. So clearly there's a hierarchy of victims. A trans girl is a legitimate victim with grievances. A blue-collar white conservative man isn't. So there's clearly a hierarchy of victims. But there's another point here. The empathy that the liberal or the progressive or whatever you want to call them has is limited to the trans athlete. I don't hear any empathy, maybe I'm wrong, for the biological females, for the girls, those conceived female who lost because of the presence of a biological male who has undeniable advantages when it comes to competing in sports against girls. There's just no question. Males are physiologically different with significant advantages. Now, even with, I don't know what kind of hormone tests and all this treatments and all that, but who's going to look at this and say, well, no, they didn't have an advantage. Of course they had an advantage. They won. You can't equalize it. You can't make it fair no matter what you do. But there's no acknowledgement. In fact, the story I read, one of them praised one of the girls who lost to A.B. Hernandez, saying that they were glad she got to compete, how nice it was that she got to compete and she had to go through so much. So that's a really feel-good story. That's a competitor who says, yes, I'm glad they were in the race. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. I don't know if she really thinks that. Maybe I would be surprised. But even if that's true, there's lots of other girls who also lost. Is there empathy for them? Did you talk to them? Did you hear what they have to say? It seems like progressives don't view those girls as legitimately aggrieved. So there isn't empathy for them. There's only empathy for some, but not others. All right, there's one other point I wanted to make. Maybe I will go back to Coddle on this issue. This is about the rationality or irrationality of the white working class complaining about, or what is really behind, what's really going on. Why are they upset? And she suggests that it's because their relative place in society is going down. It's not that they're actually worse off, but they're no longer ahead of other groups, women, people of color, etc. Let's see if we can get that up here for you, because I want to respond to that forcibly.
It's like an actual social problem.
But that speaks to David's point that it's not rational. It's like, and so the thing that has always struck me is that traditionally Democrats have struck me as the party that's always trying to talk about the head.
Right. So the Democrats are like, hey, we can make life better. We can address your needs, your concerns. Of course, they didn't. I mean, if you watch any of the debates or any time Kamala was being talking to any news media, she never provided any policy proposals. Well, she did very early on something that was going to go after those price gougers, which was a good idea. She talked about the first-time homebuyer credit, which wouldn't have done a lot. But mostly it was just feel good. It was emotional. I love small business people, things like that.
It's been much better at going for the gut. So it's not that you can list 6 ways in which policy is not working for you. It's that
actually, you can. And this is what the New York Times should be doing. Of course, they can list all manner of ways policy isn't working for them, whether it's, quote, free, unquote, trade. That didn't work for working people. That worked against working people. How you can say Obamacare didn't work for me. I have to pay for healthcare that I can't even afford anyway with the co-pays and the deductibles. These wars, they're not working for me. The surveillance state, it's not working for me. So there's lots of ways that people can point, lots of things people can point at and say this isn't working. And that's your job as a New York Times reporter, isn't it? But she's saying, no, we can't do that. It's the head. We've already done all these things to make life better for working people.
Feel that something's being done unfairly, or that you feel like you're falling behind.
Oh, you're falling behind.
I'll tell you exactly whose fault that is.
It's not like you really fell behind. It's just that you feel like you're falling behind. Well, the fact of the matter is that over the past 40 years or so, white people have actually, in general, in toto, done better. It's black people, people of color, who have actually found themselves falling behind. It's not white people who are falling behind. It's black people. And the reason they're upset isn't because of a relative drop. It's because an absolute drop. Poor, struggling, working people, period, are doing worse. White people, the working class white people who voted for Trump, and many of them voted for Obama, by the way, they're not nostalgic for a world where they were lorded it over all those minorities and people who knew their place and don't anymore. That's not why these white working class people are upset. They're actually, under the Democratic and Republican neoliberal regime, doing better. You can see that. The racial wealth gap isn't closing. Democrats haven't made things relatively better for black people. People of color, they've actually made things worse since the 1980s. Yes, during the civil rights movement, things got a little better. But starting in the 80s, the racial wealth gap began to widen. So what white voters, working class voters, Trump voters, they're hearkening back to a pre-Reagan, pre-Clinton time when they had enough. And yes, it was fine. Black people were doing better too, but they're working class just like us. It's not about sociological changes or culture or envy or resentment against other poor, struggling, and working people. It's about the reality that the policies that both parties pursued since at least the 1980s have decimated poor, struggling, and working people. And that's why they're moving away from the Democrats and to the Republicans. And that's completely not understood by the New York Times panel. And the New York Times panel is paid not to understand that, because the people who run the New York Times are affluent, because the New York Times is run for the benefit of its very powerful advertisers and for elites. And if they came clean, they would have to give up some of their privileges, the individual's privileges. It's very, very, very sad. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the answer is. I do vote for Greens. Do not vote for Democrats. It's so hilarious. The people who voted for Trump, according to CNN, a new poll, according to CNN, those people who irrationally blame black people for their plight, according to the New York Times, they actually want the government to do more for them. They want the government to do more. But they're not getting it, because the government doesn't work for you. It works for the billionaire elites. And until we change the people in government, change the people in power, till we vote them out, lock, stock, and barrel, root and branch, Things are going to get worse and worse and worse. All right, I will be back tomorrow. We'll have an Arlen Tuesday. Hope you're well. Hope you enjoy your afternoon. Thanks for making Halitics part of your day.